So I just went live, so we will do the English Q&A now. Let me wait for some of you guys to join in. So I just did the German version of the live stream, and now we will do the English version of the live stream. Hey, Overclocking TV is here. Hey mate, how's it going? Franco is also here. Hey, nice to see you here. Can we still write in German? No. You can write in German, but I will not answer any German comments. So let's wait for some guys to join in here. You can already ask some questions if you want, and then we can discuss your questions first, and once some of you guys are in here, then I can answer the stuff I want to discuss with you guys. What do you think about RX Vega? Vega, I think, is kind of disappointing to me. Not really what I expected. I mean, yeah, it's kind of a little bit faster than 1080, but considering the price and that NVIDIA Volta is probably coming around the corner in a bit, I'm not so sure how good RX Vega will be. How can the USA get your new delete tool? So we're working on availability in the US. We will probably have, I think, Amazon should have the delete tools listed. So Delete 2 and Delete X will be listed on Amazon US. Should actually be listed already. I'm not really sure, I have to check that, but keep checking Amazon US for sure. We're working on global availability for the Delete Dimates. So somebody's asking about micro ATX boards for AMD Threadripper. I'm not really sure if there are any micro ATX boards planned, considering also the size of the socket. Not even sure how much sense it would make. I mean, it would look quite funny, but I'm not sure if there will be boards for this. When do you think the graphics cards will drop by their costs again? I think once the mining hype is going a little bit down and the price of the Bitcoin is getting stable, then probably the graphics card prices should also become normal again. Because at the moment it's really, really weird. So, I mean, recently I sold a 1080, GTX 1080 I acquired a few months ago, and I bought it new, and I sold it for exactly the same price now than what I paid new, but I used it for months, so it's actually quite sad. Is it possible to mount Asus X99 Rampage Edition 10 VRM cooler from EK Waterblocks on the new Apex 299? From what I know, it doesn't fit. I mean, it should be close, but it should not fit from what I know. The dimensions are slightly different. But actually, I think the Apex X299 cooler should probably also fit on the X299 Extreme. Hi, liquid metal worth for GPU cooling on Zotac Extreme cooler. I mean, it works, but I'm really not that much a fan of using liquid metal on like direct coolers. I'm really a fan of using liquid metal underneath the IHS and put it between the die and the IHS. For that, liquid metal is really awesome. Performance is extremely good, but on top of the IHS between the cooler and also on VGAs, I'm not really that much of a fan because it's just such a mess if you have to clean it off. I'm not really a fan of that in this way. So, Hans Power just joined in and asked, "Hi, I'm not too late. Any news on AMD front in terms of the deleting video?" So that's the first topic I wanted to talk about with you guys in the English Q&A. And so to clear the things up, so I was in contact with AMD Germany when I first published my Threadripper deleting video, and I sent them the link even so they could check it. And once the video was online, after a little time, they sent me they revoked it and said, okay, you have to take the video offline. So for the content you provided, you have to wait until the NDA is lifted. So I have to work now. I have to wait now until the NDA is lifted for Threadripper because kind of AMD Global has overwritten AMD Germany. So we have to wait for that. I wanted to talk in general about AMD Threadripper versus Skylake X as well. So the thing is, AMD Threadripper is getting quite a lot of hype at the moment, and I mean, I really find it extremely funny if you guys post on my videos and say, hey, Intel is so shitty, and yeah, Intel is cutting lanes and all the stuff with the thermal paste and all this stuff. I mean, it's funny if I read all the comments, but on the other hand, I'm not sure if the AMD hype is worth it. I mean, looking at Threadripper performance and considering that it's basically 2 Ryzen dies and you can expect what the single-threaded performance will be, what the overclocking headroom should be. Also, you can probably just calculate the multi-threading performance. So yeah, I'm not really sure if Threadripper is worth all the hype. I mean, I also read the comments that X399 has 64 PCI Express lanes, while X299 has only 44 on the 10 core and then only 28 on the 6 and 8 core. And for sure, I understand what you mean. I also don't understand why they are cutting the PCI Express lanes on 6 and 8 core, but on the other hand, you don't really need them. So the thing is, if you want to run a single GPU and maybe an NVMe, a PCI Express SSD, then even 28 lanes and 28 lanes are fine because you can use 16 lanes for one GPU, and then you have still 4 PCI Express lanes for an NVMe drive, or even more for, I don't know, for sound cards or whatever. So using 44 lanes on the 10 core is probably a bit better if you want to run multi-GPU, if you want to run 2 NVIDIA GPUs, for example. I mean, these days nobody's running 4 GPUs anymore, so you don't need 64 PCI Express lanes. On RX Vega, you can run 4 GPUs, but the question is it worth it? Does it even scale? Does the driver support it really? Is it even worth looking at the price performance? So yeah. Hey, Tanzverbot. It's funny that you joined in. Nice to see you here. So Hans Power is saying, wait, I thought those were epic dies. So yeah, I mean, from my point of view, from what I know, from what I got confirmed, Threadripper is basically epic. So I also read about that. So we have the PCB, right, that contains 4 Ryzen dies. So from what I know, it's 4 8-core Ryzen dies on there. And so I read on PC World that they apparently figured out that 2 of those dies are just dummy dies, and I think that's the biggest crap I've heard in a while. I mean, to mount a piece of silicon on a PCB, you have to have the solder bumps between the PCB and between the die, so you have to prepare the silicon die itself. And considering that the silicon itself is extremely expensive and you also have to prepare the die, I'm pretty sure, or let's say I'm 100% sure that this is not a dummy die for sure. It could be a broken Ryzen die, like not functional core, or I don't know, but for sure it's not a dummy piece of silicon, for sure not. Which hardware is in your private PC? So I have several rigs I'm using. So on my streaming rig, for example, here, that's also the rig I'm using to cut my videos. On that one, I have the Rampage 5 Edition 10 with 32 GB of memory. I'm using the G.Skill Trident Z RGB memory, not because it has RGB, but because it can clock extremely well. Then I have the Core i7-6950X on there. It's still X99, but 10 cores is pretty sufficient running streams and doing video editing. So that's my video editing rig. And then I have a separate rig next to me, which I use just for the daily stuff, for surfing on the internet, for gaming. And on that system, I'm actually still using Ivy Bridge. So I want to update that rig soon with probably X299. Maybe Coffee Lake once it's out. I'm not sure about that yet. I still have to wait a few months because I don't have time for now to update it. But on that rig I have 1080 Ti in there, and I have Ivy Bridge 37700K. That CPU is overclocked to 4.5 GHz and it's pretty much fine for any games nowadays. I have 16 GB of memory in there, so that's pretty sufficient for my gaming. So yeah, at the moment I'm playing a lot of PlayerUnknown's Battleground. That game is so nice. I'm really addicted to it at the moment. I just actually, before streaming the German version, I was playing a little bit PlayerUnknown's Battleground with some friends, and once the stream is done, I'll go back to my gaming rig and play another round, I guess. What else would you do on a Sunday, of course? When it comes to Diamate X, so yeah, I'm getting a lot of questions about Diamate and Diamate X. So let's talk first about Diamate 2. The tool has now pretty good availability, at least in Europe. We spread it out to almost all the shops. We're getting pretty good availability also in the US now. So we will have Amazon US having the Diamate 2. Once the Diamate X is out there, we will also have the Diamate X in the US. We will also have it in, of course, all over Europe, over Case King, over Overclockers UK. And Diamate X will probably take another 4 weeks. So the thing is, the initial Diamate X worked quite well using Skylake X, but using Kaby Lake X, the tool basically breaks down after a few CPUs because the aluminium cannot sustain the force coming from the screw. So the force you need to delete the CPUs on X299 is really, it's brutal. So I had to make the Diamate X a little bit heavier, a little bit stronger. So I changed the design and I added a stainless steel thread insert into the aluminium. I changed the stainless steel parts a little bit, so it has a little bit more headroom of deleting the CPUs. You can use the lever for a longer distance. So I was optimizing the Diamate X quite a lot. So it's in production now. So if everything works out well, then it should be out in 3 to 4 weeks. I'm really working on it. You can be sure that I'm pushing quite a lot to have the Diamate X available soon. So I also wanted to talk with you about X299. So you probably all saw my X299 VRM disaster video and all the stuff you saw about it in the internet. So the thing was, when I did the X299 video, essentially at the beginning I didn't want to do it because you can imagine that if I do this kind of video, what the impact is on the industry. That I mean, I know basically everyone at all the vendors at Asus, MSI, Gigabyte, whatever. So if I do a video like that, it has quite a lot of impact, not only on media, also on a personal level. Like people would contact me like, what the hell am I doing and why am I doing this kind of negative PR and all this kind of thing. But the thing is, I know how those companies work. And if I would give the feedback on email to them and say, hey, look, your cooler is not sufficient, it's just design, but the functionality is zero, then the reply would be, oh yeah, thanks for your feedback, and yeah, we will consider working on it in the next generation, whatever. So they would probably do nothing about it, even if I would send, I don't know, 50 emails. So I decided to make it public, just to have a certain impact on the industry, to make sure that they listen and that they know that design is not the only thing that matters. For sure, design is awesome. I like how the boards look nowadays compared to 10 years ago. Design is awesome. But they should never forget about the functionality, and that the board should be really, really good. That the VRMs have to be cool, because nobody wants their VRM to run at 105 degrees Celsius. That's just not cool. Why the delay in seeing the Asus high-end board Apex and Rampage for X299? That's the question. So the thing is, Intel initially wanted to publish X299 and Skylake X end of August. So they pulled in the launch by, let's say, 3 months because of they were afraid of Threadripper basically. They were afraid of losing sales to Threadripper. So they decided to pull in the launch from X299. And the thing is, I mean, you cannot expect a mainboard vendor to design such a board, develop such a board in, I don't know, 0 time in 30 days. That's not how it works. So Asus and the other vendors basically had 0 time to develop proper overclocking boards, and that's why the boards are still not available. It's simply because they need time to work on their good boards. So I think we should see availability in the next 1 or 2 weeks of Apex and Rampage. So yeah. Let me go through some of your comments. So many comments. Any info on more AM4 ITX? I think ASRock is working on AM4 ITX boards, but I'm really not sure about availability. I think the market is also extremely small for those boards, so the vendors are probably focusing on different products at the moment. Hey there, Baro, do you still have to pay around 300 bucks for a custom water loop, or is it possible to get quality loop for less these days? I mean, if you want to go for a proper custom water-cooled loop solution with a proper pump, reservoir, radiators and coolers, I think even 300 bucks is not enough. So high quality stuff. Personally, I really love EK water blocks. Their quality is just extremely good. Also perfect support. So personally, I would always go for EK water blocks, and considering that you need like 50 euro for a water block, then you need another 100 for a pump and reservoir, then you need another 100 for the radiator. So yeah, at least 300 bucks for a custom solution. I know that EK water blocks is working on those coolers for cheaper, made out of aluminium. They're actually quite good, performance wise and price wise, but personally, I mean, if you go for water cooling, might as well spend another 100 or 200 euros and just get the highest performance ever. Oh yeah, there's also somebody asking about a new EK kit. I mean, I tested the aluminium one, and performance-wise, it's pretty close to the copper solution. You just have to keep in mind that you're limited to using the aluminium radiator, aluminium fittings, and all this kind of stuff. Just make sure that you get the right stuff. You should never mix up the copper and aluminium parts. If you focus on that, it should be fine. The performance is not that much worse. So considering that it's quite lower in price, it's really not a bad option. Is the Threadripper B2 stepping? I honestly have no clue. The last time I had a Threadripper CPU in my hands was like 1 or 2 months ago, and I cannot even remember what was written on the IHS. And I mean, even in those days, the Threadripper was probably not retail status, so it could still change something from that time. Any info on Threadripper VRMs? Are they good enough for OC on the 16 core? So I'm really happy about that question. Thanks to the backyard chemist. Yeah. Thanks for that question. So what I find really funny is, so I recently saw a news on PC Games Hardware, which is a German media, and they basically compared the X399 motherboards from Computex, where most of the vendors showed their boards the first time, to now when they, well, finally launched their boards. The funny part is that almost all boards have different VRM heatsink designs now. A lot of boards have like 2 pieces where they have the one solid block on top and then the heat pipe is connecting to another solid block. So it seems that after the X299 video that a lot of people finally focused on more on the VRMs and overclocking, and then figure out that they need stronger VRM coolers. So I think, yeah, it looks quite good from what I can see. Another question, after trying to run the deleted Threadripper and it broke, did you see any additional damage to the chip, like something burned or so? No. we could not see anything. I'm really not sure why and how the chip died. A lot of comments also said that on the corner of the chip that some of the SMD caps were cut off and some were in strange positions on all this kind of stuff. So we noticed that as well when we deleted the chip. We also saw straight that we cut into some of the caps and then we removed some of them. But we also checked if they would short anything, and from the looks, they didn't short anything. So that should have been fine. And if they were only caps to stabilize the voltage of the CPU, it should also not be an issue if the cap was removed. So honestly, I'm not really sure why the Threadripper CPU died. Yeah, it could be that because when we push down with a hairdryer, when we with a heat gun, when we push down the CPU, that the PCB was bending a little bit, and maybe we damaged something inside the PCB. I'm really not sure. Any updates on the reason for removal of the Threadripper deleting video? Yeah, well, it was basically a communication issue between me and AMD Germany and AMD Global. So AMD Germany first gave me the permission to post it, but then AMD Global said, oh no, that's content you cannot disclose yet. So it was more of a communication issue, and for now I have to hold back the video until Ryzen NDA is lifted, which will be soon. I cannot disclose the date actually, but it will be soon, and then we can talk about that video again. Any opinion on 8-core Threadripper from Michael Griffith? And I'm not sure about that. Technically, I think it's possible. It should be possible to have an 8-core Threadripper, but I'm not sure if they will do it. Overclocking TV says, so you broke the NDA. Well, I broke the NDA with the permission of AMD Germany. But then AMD Global said, no, you cannot do it. So yeah, technically I broke the NDA, but yeah, that's how it goes. It was basically a communication issue. How do you find RX Vega? Well, as I said before, I think RX Vega for me is a little bit disappointing. I mean, considering the price and that the performance seems to be just like 1080 level, I'm not really sure what I should think about this. I expected more personally. I also wished that they would have launched it earlier. I mean, imagine if they would have launched it a year ago, that would be really, really awesome. But now that probably Nvidia has Volta almost ready, I'm not sure how much Vega can still do. What is the price of Vega? I don't have any, like, I didn't have Vega in my hands. I don't have like official info. I can only repeat what I wrote, what I read myself on the internet. So, I mean, I think it's around 1,000 euro and about 1080 performance. So I'm not really that sure. Yeah, the backyard chemist, I agree. Yeah, I also think that the force in the middle, which we applied to delete the CPU, could have been too much and cracked some of the stuff inside. It's very, very likely. I mean, if you downloaded the picture pack I attached to the video, then you could see that some of the the PCB was heavily bent. So yeah. Mark is asking, can you recommend a X299 motherboard for i7 7820X at 4.5 GHz for under 400 euro? That's actually a tough question. So the VRMs itself, looking at the components, MOSFETs are actually quite solid on most of the boards. So even the Aorus Gaming 3 I tested and the MSI Pro Gaming Carbon, they all have pretty much the same components from International Rectifier. So the VRMs itself are really good. You might want to place a fan directly above the VRM if you're overclocking, then those boards should be fine. If you use a custom water cooling solution and you will add a cooling block on VRMs, any of those boards should be fine. But apart from that, so far I'm not sure which board under 400 euro I would recommend. Okay, so I see some replies that apparently Vega is at $4.99 for air cooled and $5.99 for liquid cooled. Like, I mean, if that's true, then it's not a bad card for that price, to be honest. As I said, I'm really not familiar that much with RX Vega. I didn't have a card myself in the hands. I really have no information about this. Plus is asking, are you working on a Threadripper deleting tool? No, I'm not, because it's pretty much impossible to delete the CPU without damaging it. It's the same as Ryzen. Also, it makes no sense, because if the CPU is soldered, even if you delete it and if you apply liquid metal, then the performance gain is few degrees Celsius with liquid metal, so yeah. Okay, so I see all the pricing now for RX Vega. Thanks for all the info. It's good to know. I really didn't keep track on this. Bullzoid, aka Actual Hardcore Overclocking, is asking if the X99 Gaming 3 is a 6-phase VCC in or 8. Honestly, I'm not sure. I have to check. You can check the post from Elmore on overclock.net where he listed all the boards. I gave him the info and he wrote it there, but I cannot remember, man. I tested so many boards that I think it was 8, but I'm really not sure. Threadripper or 7900X? That's the question I'm hearing quite a lot, and honestly my personal opinion is that I would go for Skylake X. Even though I hate it on the platform for having the bad VRMs, the thing is with Threadripper, considering that we will have 2 Ryzen dice, and of course we cannot disclose performance yet, but you can guess if it's 2 Ryzen dice and basically 2 1800X, the single core performance should be roughly the same. In multi-threading, you can just guess. So gaming wise, I don't think it's that great. And if you take a 7900X stock, it's not great either. But if you overclock it and if you have it deleted with liquid metal, it can be potentially a very good chip. So I saw some, even on Hardware Looks, I saw someone with a 7900X on a MSI Pro Gaming Carbon, and that guy overclocked the CPU to 5 GHz. So if you have it running at 5G or even 4.5, let's say above 4.5, the performance of the CPU is really, really good, even single threaded. So yeah. Oh, Hardware just joined in. It's a German YouTuber. Hey guys, nice to see you here. So how much does your tool cost? So for the delete I made 2 for deleting the normal, the smaller desktop chips like Skylake, Kaby Lake, that one is 30 euro. Should be also 30 US dollar in the US, I think, if once it's listed on Amazon US. The Dille Dynamite X so far is 90 euro. We're working on making it cheaper, but considering how much time it takes to produce this part, how many out of how many parts it consists, it's really, really difficult to make it cheaper. So the yeah, I'm working on Dille Diamond X, and I think it should be available in 3 to 4 weeks, but it's really difficult. Yeah, I had a lot of issues with the quality so far, but now it all looks good. Now it's in production, but I hope it will be available in 3 to 4 weeks, yes. Do you have a preferred manufacturer for motherboards or graphics cards, e.g. MSI, Asus, Gigabyte, etc.? I really don't have. Like, I like most of the vendors. There are some products that are good on each vendor, and each vendor has a product that also sucks. So I really don't have a preference on that. So for example, ASRock is having really good boards. Quality is extremely good these days. Also memory compatibility. MSI picked up quite a lot as well. I didn't really like MSI for, let's say, C97, C87. VRMs were not that great, but now MSI is doing also extremely well. I like the MSI design. MSI BIOS is also really strong now. So Asus, of course, for extreme overclocking, I think there is no alternative to that. To using the ROG boards, Apex and Extreme, best for that. So yeah. Hardware is asking if you OC an old platform like FM2, do you know immediately which settings are useful or are positive for OC? Yeah, usually I do. I mean, I tested almost all platforms that are out there, FM1, FM2, FM2 Plus, whatever. And I mean, it's only a few settings that you have to set. I mean, basically vCore, nothing else. And yeah, usually I actually do know, yeah. Will Coffee Lake run on Z270? That's a good question. I don't think so. I think it will be C370 or whatever Intel is planning. I'm not sure. I haven't had Coffee Lake in my hands yet. I think that's too early, so we'll see what's going on. Coffee Lake will be quite interesting though, I think. I mean, considering that from what we saw so far from the leaks, Coffee Lake should be Kaby Lake with 2 additional cores. So if it clocks the same as Kaby Lake and it has 2 additional cores and the pricing is the same and the IPC is the same, then that should be probably the new go-to platform for gaming, because I mean, then we should see 6 cores at above 5 gigahertz, and that should be really, really awesome if that's going to work out. Somebody is asking if there is a way to stop my CPU fan from ramping up to 100% at 70 degrees Celsius and X299. Yeah, it depends just on your board. You just have to go into the BIOS and configure your fan settings. I mean, I only know if you use Asus, then you can just switch it to silent mode in the BIOS, and this problem is immediately solved. If you use MSI, then you have those fan curves you can just drag with your mouse and fix this problem this way. Let the delete games begin for Intel. Yeah, I can actually confirm that my delete diamate works for Coffee Lake. Jacob is asking if I speak French. I actually had French in school for 3 years and I cannot remember anything. I can just order a baguette with cheese and ham probably, and that's it. What are your go-to games at the moment? I basically have one go-to game, and that's PlayerUnknown's Battleground. I'm really addicted to that game at the moment. I think I wasted way too much time on that game in the last 2 months. But it's just such an awesome game. Even though it's just one map, I mean, the direction of the plane is different every single time, and you play with different people, and then you always have different weapons, then it goes to a different circle. And yeah, it's just such a great game. I wish they would do a first-person version soon, because I'm really not a fan of the third-person stuff. It gives you such an unfair advantage, but yeah, PlayerUnknown's Battleground is pretty much my go-to game at the moment. What do you think about RX 560 Crossfire as budget system? I would never Crossfire such a low budget GPU. Same goes for SLI. I think SLI and Crossfire should only be used if you're already at a maximum what you can buy for a single GPU, and if you need more performance, then you should get an additional GPU. Otherwise, always get a single GPU, because it's just much more power efficient. You don't have that stuff like micro stuttering and all this bullshit that comes with SLI and Crossfire. So yeah, never go for Crossfire or SLI on a cheaper GPU. Only use it if you, for example, if you have a 1080 Ti and the performance is not enough because you want to play 8K on, I don't know, downscaling, whatever, then you should get an additional 1080 Ti, but never use SLI or Crossfire with cheap GPUs. I think that's not worth it. How do you overclock your hair? Oh yeah. Actually, you should ask Bullsoid about that. He's much better at overclocking his hair. I think his hair is completely overclocked, and sometimes his hair is even unstable if you look at his channel. How did you get into overclocking? Basically, I started, I think 2005, 2004 with normal overclocking. Sorry, lost it about the hair comment. So yeah, so I started overclocking like 2005, 2006 in that area when I was doing normal air and water overclocking. Actually, back in the days, I was overclocking my AMD FX system. I'm just thinking if I have this system laying around here, if I could just show it to you guys. Give me 1 second, I will check if I have this board here. That should be a very nice board to show to you guys. Alright, I'm back, and I found the board, because I knew I had it in my hands a little bit a few days ago. That is one of my absolute favorite boards. That's basically when I started overclocking with this board, like serious overclocking. So that's an Asus L1N64 SLI WS. So that's it's a socket F AMD board. That's the board I was using back in those days when I was overclocking. It basically has AMD FX 6000 relabeled to AMD FX 7400, I think it was called, and it basically has two dual core CPUs on there. So this was AMD's attempt to fight Intel's quad core. So the Q6600 was out in those days, and that was AMD's attempt to fight the Intel quad core, which was a very funny solution, like adding two dual cores for desktop. I mean, it never really worked out price performance wise. Also the power consumption on that board was ridiculous, but I really loved this platform. Like I spent so much time on that board with optimizing the cooling and trying to overclock those CPUs, which had basically zero overclocking headroom, but I really loved this board. Do you think X299WS by Asus is gonna have good VRMs, maybe core band heat pipes? From what I've seen, the X299WS is probably gonna be the best board on the market for X299. I saw some of the heatsink and it looked extremely good. It probably has the best heatsink design of all the X299 boards, even the desktop boards. Do you think AMD asked you to take down your video because they didn't want people to know what's going on inside? Yeah, for sure, they didn't want people to know. Of course, that's the reason. I mean, I didn't disclose any kind of performance of the CPU, so yeah, it can only be that reason. Yeah. Do you think Threadripper will overclock any better? I highly doubt that. Hey Roman, which X299 would you recommend? ASRock X299, Tai Chi or Asus Mark 1? I really wouldn't get the Asus Mark 1. That's not a good board. I would, in that case, I would go for the Tai Chi, I think. My friend wants to buy my old FX 8350, but I'm not sure if that's a good idea. Will he have troubles or it's fine? I don't want to let him down. It depends on the price. I mean, if you're asking for $10, it should be fine. Otherwise, I'm really not a fan of those CPUs. Like the FX 8350 is not a good chip. It's getting so hot. The power consumption is extremely high, and the performance is really not good. So yeah, I would rather get, in that case, you know, the Pentium G4560, I think it's called. There's this dual core with HT from Intel. It's for Z270 or for socket 1151. You should actually look into that chip. If you want to do like really budget gaming, it only has 2 cores and 2 cores in HT, 4 threads, but price performance wise, it's a really solid CPU. Somebody's asking, where do you work? Case King, the Dymate, and PC World? I'm actually, yeah, well, I work for Case King. That's my daily job. The Case King stuff here is just a hobby, just something I do because I like it. I like to show some of the stuff I do to you guys, and because I feel that there's a lot of misinformation out there, a lot of rumors that are not true, and sometimes I feel that I have to do videos to debunk that stuff, and that's why I basically do the YouTube videos. Jacob is asking on which PC I play at home. So I'm not sure if I already answered that question on the English stream. I did it on the German for sure. So currently my gaming rig is just some old parts. It's an Ivy Bridge 3770K, which is overclocked to 4.5. But I will update that one soon. I'm planning actually to go on X299 in a bit, and I want to do a lot of videos about the build on my channel as well, because the CPU is really not that good anymore, and I'm using a 1080 Ti in there, which is sufficient for any games. That's pretty good, but I want to have a new mainboard with proper NVMe SSDs and a proper CPU. Where is Ryzen 3 testing and deleting? The Toaster is asking. It's actually a good question. I actually have a Ryzen 3 CPU. Maybe I should delete it, but I think it's gonna look just the same as Ryzen 5 and Ryzen 7, but it's actually, it's a good idea. I think I will just do that next week and post a short video about how Ryzen 3 looks. I think it should be soldered, but I'm actually not sure. It could even be paste. I mean, the TDP is not high, so they could even use paste, but I'm not sure if they would. Does phase doubling VRMs negatively impact overclocking on air, water enough to worry about it? I mean, doubling phase is better than having it not doubled. I mean, if you have 4 native phases and you have them doubled to 8, it's better than just having the 4, simply because you spread the heat and the heat that is dissipated from the VRMs on a bigger surface on the PCB, and also on a bigger surface on the potential VRM cooler. So doubling the VRMs is for sure better than not doubling, but it's also not helping a lot. What is your opinion why Intel is using thermal paste instead of solder to attach IHS with CPU even in their new AGDT CPU line? Could it be indeed due to cost saving for the longevity on the CPU? For sure it has to be because of the price. I mean, it's very complicated also to do the soldering. You have to do this specific layering where you add some, I think it's tin vanadium, and a lot of, you have to add gold on the wafer itself. You have to add gold on the heat spreader. Then you also have to use a solder sheet. So processing wise, it's a lot more complicated to do soldering, and should also maybe impact the yield rate even. I'm not sure how critical that process step is, but yeah, I think it's more a price and process reason why they don't do it. I mean, if there is no reason to do it, if the CPUs are running fine on stock, why would they do it? Overclocking is something that's up to us enthusiasts. So if we want to unlock the maximum clocks, maximum performance, we have to find our own way to do it. That's not surprising. The Spitting Llama is asking what my educational background is, specifically if I'm an electrical engineer. No, I'm not an electrical engineer. I actually studied microelectrical engineering. So it's more related to how silicon stuff is processed. It's more about constructing stuff. So it's a little bit of electrical engineering as well, but not as much. Dominic Schmitz is asking if I'm sure which CPU I'm gonna use for my gaming rig. I'm actually thinking of using the i7 7820X, because I still have one of those CPUs around and I don't really need 10 cores. I could even use the 6 cores for gaming, should still be fine, but I have an 8 core lying around here already, so I might as well use that chip. Do I have to be worried when the CPU voltage turns red in the BIOS? So that's a typical thing. The thing is, the BIOS engineers often do not know the exact limits, so the color differences in the BIOS do not always reflect what you can actually use. I often saw that it got red at a ridiculous point where it was way too high already, and sometimes it's already turning red when it's still completely fine. So I would not give anything about the colors in the BIOS. Oh yeah, there's a question about Gamescom. So by the way, if any of you guys is at Gamescom this year, I will be at Gamescom the whole week at Case King booth. We will have the booth in Hall 8. So if you're at Gamescom, feel free to join me for some, I don't know, some chats. I will have very nice Case King energy drinks with me. So just pass by if you're there. Would be really nice to see some of you guys there. Be honest, do you have Rampage 6 Extreme behind you somewhere? Unfortunately not. I wish I had, but it's not ready yet. Can you say squirrel? Man, that word. What the hell, squirrel? No. Feel free to get free autographs from the Grandmaster at Gamescom. I actually don't have any kind of autographs stuff in this. I'd rather have a chat with you guys. I think that's much cooler. Do you know of any Ivy Bridge CPUs that suffered from the thermal paste issues because of its age? Not that I know. I mean, I still use my Ivy Bridge CPU in my rig here as well, and it's still fine. So I think the thermal paste Intel is using is bad performance-wise, but it's really stable. So it's always bad. So it's actually not that bad in general. So at least the thermal paste on the Intel CPUs is not really degrading. That's a good thing. When is your Skylake X 2 coming out? Skylake X 2 will be ready in about 3 to 4 weeks from now. What do you think about GPUs that are used for mining? Is it good at all? After all, is it good after all that torture? Personally, I would not get a mining GPU. I mean, those CPUs, those PCBs especially, those are not meant to run 24/7. So the components which are on there, the coolers, the VRMs, and all those components are not meant to run 24/7 for, I don't know, months. So potentially, I think those cards would break down a lot earlier if they were used for a few months for mining. So personally, I would never buy a mining GPU. Which terminal grease do you use actually? Usually it really depends. I mean, if I'm deleting a CPU, I use thermal grease conductor node between the IHS and the die, because I think the liquid metal is extremely good underneath the die and between the IHS. But personally, I also do not like using liquid metal between the cooler and the IHS because it's causing such a mess. So I'm often using thermal grease cryo node on there. Do you prefer 1800X or 7700K for gaming workstation PCs? So the thing is, if it's just gaming, I would go for the 7700K. If you really do workstation stuff on there, like a lot of rendering, then you should probably get the Ryzen CPU, because of the more cores. It should be better for multi-threading. But if it's just gaming, I would really go for Kaby Lake. Yeah, 7900X or 7820X for gaming workstation. That is also one thing I'm really confused about with Intel. So they will release the 12 core, 14 core, 16 core, 18 core. Like, how do you even know which core, like which amount of cores are you going to get? I mean, I cannot think of a situation where somebody is going to say, hey, I have a gaming system and I want to have exactly 12 cores. I don't want to have 10, and 14 is too much, so I will get 12. And then the next guy will say, hey, I will get 16 because 18 is too much and 14 is not enough performance. I mean, 12, 14, 16, really, I think it's really unnecessary CPUs. So it's gonna be interesting who's going to buy which CPU. For how long are you working for Case King now? 2 years, 2.5? I'm not extremely sure. Yeah, it should be 2.5 years, yeah. Do you think the Asus X399 Zenith will have better VRM cooling compared to X99? I'm not sure. If I looked, I mean, looking at the pictures from where they showed the board the first time, not so sure if it's gonna be great VRM temperature wise. But that goes for all X399 boards. We have to see what the final VRM design gonna be. Actually, let me show you something. I also showed that on the German stream. So I'm really a fan of having like collectibles and hardware collectibles, like wafers and stuff. So I have this. That's something I recently acquired. It's an Intel Cadron, and it's a Wi-Fi module. You can see, what I really like about this part is you can see that the wafer is attached on a blue sheet, and you can see that the blue sheet is flexible. You can also see that you can see through the wafer, right, at some specific points, and that's because they cut the wafer, like the wafer was glued onto this blue foil, and then you can see it's flexible, right? It's pretty nice. So you can see the wafer was completely cut in very small pieces where they picked out the working dies, I guess, and then they left the leftovers on there. So that's an Intel Cadron Wi-Fi module. Just something I wanted to show you. Is Case King your actual day job, or is this a sponsor thing? Are you a partner in that company? I'm working for Case King, like it's my real job, so it's not a sponsor thing. What X299 motherboard are you going to use for your personal build? I'm not sure yet. I was considering using the MSI Gaming 7 or getting the Apex as well for my personal rig. What do you think about AMD Threadripper LGA socket? Is it better construction wise than Intel's? I mean, it's just an LGA socket. It's not really different from Intel's socket. It's just way bigger and it's way more complicated to use it. And I think we will see a lot of people that will damage their sockets because there are so many pins. So that's gonna be fun to see. Signaling wise, an LGA socket is a lot better than the PGA socket. Even though I'm actually a fan of the PGA socket because you cannot damage your motherboard. I see so many people that bend their pins by accident, and that's something you cannot really do on a PGA socket, so yeah, hashtag besser. Yep, I will be at Gamescom all day. So if you're there at Gamescom, just pass by. I will be at Team Hölle as well. Who does all the deleting on Case King? Are you actually involved in that, and do they use your tools? Yeah, they use all my tools. I'm also involved there every single time, so I show them how to do this, how they can use the delete tools, how exactly they have to treat the CPUs. I'm not deleting every CPU personally myself. I have people doing this, but yeah, I'm completely involved there. I do all the quality checks and laser engraving on the pre-tested CPUs, so yeah. So when do you think you'll have a chance to do a review on the X399 boards? I think that will take another 2 or 3 weeks until something will be available for test, but for sure, once something is available for X399, I will test it for sure. Also the VRMs. David is asking what I think about CPU manufacturers increasing their core count instead of focusing on single core speeds. I mean, Intel was focusing on single core speeds for quite a while. I mean, the steps of development were not huge, but the performance is actually quite good these days, and now they're having a very good IPC on Kaby Lake, and they're now increasing from 4 to 6 cores with Coffee Lake, so I think that's the right step. How much does deleting cost? So if you want to buy a deleted CPU from Case King with warranty, then it usually costs 80 to 100 euro more than the normal CPU, considering that you also have 2 years warranty and it's deleted with liquid metal. All right, let's do one more questions and then I have to leave because my addiction to PlayerUnknown's Battleground is calling me. Oh, that's a good question for the end. Why are there even heat spreaders? I don't see any use for them. They only isolate the heat. That's not true. So you need a heat spreader to push down the CPU into the LGA socket. If you don't use the heat spreader, then you don't have sufficient mounting pressure into the LGA socket and you will not have a very good contact. That's especially on Threadripper, that's a huge thing. I mean, it's 4,000 pins, so you need a huge amount of pressure to press down the CPUs, so all 4,000 pins have perfect contact to the CPU. And it's the same. It's the same with Coffee Lake, for example, or Kaby Lake. The PCB is quite thin, so if you would just push on the middle on the core, then the PCB would bend and the contact to the socket would be quite bad. So that's the reason why we have an heat spreader. All right, so I think that's it for today for the live stream. 1 hour. I actually have to rest my voice a little bit, and I'm really happy that so many people joined in for the live stream. Thanks for joining in, and I hope you have a very nice Sunday. It's actually quite nice weather out here in Berlin, so maybe I will just go outside and eat some ice cream as well after, well, playing a little bit more of Players Unknown Battleground. So I hope you have a very nice day. Thanks for joining in. See you soon.